This is the story of our Vietnam service members. The story that needs to be told. This is what this 50th anniversary is all about. It's another opportunity to say to our Vietnam veterans what we should have been saying from the beginning. You did your job. You served with honor. You made us proud. You came home and you helped build the America that we love and that we cherish.
I spent a fair amount of time in the 82nd, and we would have a reunion every year. And we'd bring in the veterans would all come in, and we'd talk about it, what their experiences were. A lot of them were World War II vets, and those were great. But the Vietnam vets, you could tell, felt like they weren't understood. There's all the heroes of the World War II movies, and of course a little bit in Korea, but the Vietnam vets couldn't relate to the same stories that the World War II vets could tell about, A Bridge Too Far and D-Day and all those Hollywood kinds of movies that glorified all that. And then what were the movies that were being shown and the books that were being written about? Most of them were fairly negative. And so I think they were struggling with that. And so it's time to recognize that is what it is, but let's also focus more on their selfless service. Their life of the Army creed. I mean, they were the latest, greatest generation of their time. Our great veterans have a tale to tell, and that's why this commemoration we're doing now is so important, so they can talk back to the American people and tell them what it was really like.
My name is George Brewer. I was one of the proud Marines serving in Vietnam from 1968, 69, and 1971 to 72.
I am Bruce Gardner. I was honored to serve as an Army helicopter pilot from 1970 to 71.
I am Richard Yanish. I proudly served in Vietnam in 1968 and 1969 as a young Army soldier.
I'm Roger Hauk. I was honored to serve as a sensor planning officer for the U.S. Air Force in Thailand in 1970 and 1971.
I am Bill King, and I was honored to be an Army soldier serving in Vietnam from 1969 to 1970.
My name is Lars Larson. In 1971 and 72, I was a combat infantryman in Vietnam.
I'm Michael Lambert. I served proudly in the Republic of Vietnam from 1969 through 1972. I was a Korean linguist.
My name is Benjamin Morgan, and from 1968 to 1969, I served as a sailor in the coastal city of Da Nang, Republic of Vietnam.
I'm Robert Thorne. I served 3 tours in Vietnam from 66 to 72 with the 3rd Ordnance Battalion, 101st Airborne Division, and 82nd Airborne Division.
1, 2, 3, 4, hey! 1, 2, 3, 4, hey!
Well, life for me before going to Vietnam, I was born and raised in South Dakota, and as a young boy growing up, our thing was, of course, we wanted to play cowboys and Indians and war. I was kind of structured around the Korean War, and there was a lot of folks within our town that went to the Korean War. So you heard the Korean War stories, and that kind of drove us kids to play war. So I always wanted to be a hero warrior type.
Well, I was drafted into the Army at 18 years old. I was living in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I just finished Fayetteville Tech Institute custodian course, and I received my draft notice. And my draft notice contained I was 1A, show up as soon as possible.
There were 9 kids in my family. At the time I volunteered for Vietnam, I was a sophomore in college. My father had 5 children in college at the same time, and I enlisted, volunteered to go from my Naval Reserve Unit on active duty.
I lived in Indianapolis, Indiana. I was 17 years old when I enlisted. It was scary because the point of making a decision to come in the military was not my own. It was one of my parents. I'm kind of glad they did that now, but then I wasn't so excited about it.
The minute you hit the country, a clock started on your time there. And everybody was arriving at different times, so within a unit, people were coming and going constantly.
And then I was picked up, what I would count my first day in Vietnam, on the 30th of January 1968, and flown from Way Phu Bai to Quang Tri, which is almost at the DMZ, one town south of the demilitarized zone. And the first flight I was in the jump seat, and we got a bullet hole in the windshield, and I'm pounding this warrant officer flying the aircraft on his shoulder, yelling at him what happened. And he said, "I don't know, sir." I was a second lieutenant. "I don't know, sir. Just been this way the past few days." And it was the first day of Tet. No one had any idea what Tet was.
When we arrived in Vietnam, we arrived in Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base to a 122 rocket attack. So as we got off our aircraft arriving, our commercial aircraft, we were hustled right out into a bunker complex for which we stayed there for about 2 hours until the rocket attack was finished. They put us on a truck and they hauled us out to Cam Ranh Bay.
My first day in Vietnam was very traumatic. I got there on a C-130. I went through Okinawa, left out of Travis Air Force Base. And when I came off the airplane, and we all lined up and we were all in formation, I was a Brown Bar Lieutenant Marine. I'd been through training, and I looked down to the left and I looked over to the right. And all I saw was rows of coffins with American flags on them. And I looked at the guy next to me and looked around, and I said, "I guess that's what we're here for, huh?" And it proved to be very true for a lot of us, and I feel like I was very fortunate to have survived. It was a sunny day, and it was very emotional to see those flags. And little did I realize how many of the buddies that I had gone through infantry school with and everything else may have been among those coffins going back home.
Militarily speaking, South Vietnam is divided into 4 areas. The 4th Corps area in the south, the 3rd Corps, the 2nd Corps, and in the north, the 1st Corps.
I was a sensor planning and placement officer, planning the emplacement and execution of missions that emplaced acoustic and seismic devices along what we call the strategic supply route, the Ho Chi Minh Trail, running from North Vietnam down through Laos, Cambodia, and back into South Vietnam. We used to call ourselves the Laotian Highway Patrol.
The mission of Naval Support Activity Da Nang, where I was assigned, and my mission as a seaman were exactly the same: naval logistics. Da Nang was the Navy's largest overseas command. It supported over 200,000 U.S., Vietnamese, and friendly foreign forces in their fight against the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese.
We ate sea rations, which were really the same rations that my father had in World War II and folks had in Korea. But we'd mix them with in-flight rations because that had orange juice. And then we'd eat the LERP rations, which were dried food that you could mix with water. And we tried to keep a kind of a variety of those meals.
The food was actually very good. The food was prepared in dining halls run by soldiers. We had soldiers for cooks, unlike the way everything is contracted out right now. In fact, I enjoyed the food so much I purposefully gained about 30 pounds while I was in Vietnam, which was not most people's experience. They would lose some weight.
Uniforms, they were a very lightweight, drab, olive green, multi-pocket shirt, trousers, web boots. Very standard for that time. Unlike the uniforms we have today, they really wore out. I mean, I can remember getting my uniform done by the villagers. After 3 or 4 washes, they would fall apart because you put rice starch in them, you know, you beat them down on rocks and everything, and after a while, between that and the heat, eventually they just fall apart.
Only power that we had on the landing zone was one 5 kW generator, which we weren't allowed to use at night because of flight discipline. The landing zone was either rocketed or mortared every night. Not most nights. It was rocketed or mortared every night.
Letters, the first letter I got when I was in Vietnam the first time was 4 months from the time I left the States. But it didn't bother me because I knew I had a job to do.
I got written letters every time the mail came in a box normally. All the guys were depending on me to be around them when the mail came in, because I normally had a box from my mother, my sister, my brother, or my friends.
Was rather humorous, and we were taking a resupply, and we were in basically a triple canopy jungle, so they flew over us, kicked our supplies out, and one of them was the mail bag, which we all look forward to mail. And it came ricocheting down through the trees, and it finally landed, and we went over to open it up. Everybody's excited about getting mail, and found out it was drenched with this red liquid. And one of my soldiers' mothers thought she would be a real sweetheart and sent him a small bottle of red wine. It broke when it hit the trees. Everybody had wine-scented mail, which really wasn't what we wanted at that particular point in time.
I think the biggest difference in equipment between Vietnam and now is that in Vietnam, so much of the operations were what we refer to as dismounted infantry, people walking through the jungle. So that you weren't transported to a lot of places, and there weren't the IEDs that we have now, the improvised explosive devices. So we did not have the heavily armored vehicles that we have now. We did not need those.
Since we were light infantry patrolling on the ground in the mountains, most of our equipment was very similar to what my father had in World War II in Korea. A rifle, grenades, rucksack, and rations that you carried. But the big thing was the helicopter, and that's how we got around and got in and out of the jungle.
Well, I think technologies we use today that would have helped what we were doing back at that time, certainly the connectivity, the networking, even the social media would have been a huge benefit, I think.
People laugh about the Pentagon as a huge bureaucracy, but someone in the Pentagon made a decision on the UH-1D model that it didn't have enough power for Vietnam, and they changed the key performance parameter that it had to hover out of ground effect on a 95-degree day at 4,000 feet pressure altitude. And to do that, they had to add 300 horsepower to it. So instead of 1,100 in the D model, the model that I only flew in Vietnam had 1,400 horsepower, limited by the pilot to 1,100, but you always had that 1,100. I wouldn't be here today if I had not had that extra 300 horsepower.
The base I was at, we used to have a saying that the snakes have the right of way. And to get from the location where I was billeted to the unit where I was assigned to, it was about a half a mile walk. And you were walking through very heavily forested jungle. And again, snakes have the right of way. It was not uncommon to see king cobras, mambas, all kinds of poisonous snakes. And you simply gave way to them. But that's a memory I'll never forget.
Our mission was to patrol the hills west and south of Chu Lai to try and prevent the Viet Cong and the Vietnamese from firing rockets into Chu Lai, which was a major base for the 23rd Infantry Division. So there was a lot of walking through the triple canopy jungle, some rice paddy work, but we preferred to stay out in the mountains itself.
Every day that you woke up, you felt lucky to be alive.
People don't really understand about serving until you're a part of it, but I thought you had to be a battlefield soldier or a Purple Heart. No. if you're on this #1 team called Army, no matter what your capacity, you're a team member.
When we happened to fly in someplace and we were required to put guards out because there was instances of the insurgents, if you will, like to drop hand grenades down into our fuel tanks on our helicopters, so we had to stand guard.
But the day I flew into Dong Ha from south, we were in the middle of an artillery attack. We had to take and offload all the troops out of the back while the C-130 still was going down the runway. We just jumped out, rolled out, and hit to the side, and there was artillery exploding everywhere. But
the camaraderie ship was, in my humble opinion, off the Richter scale. If you went down, there wasn't a person around that wouldn't plow through a lot of bullets to get you out.
We go in to pick up the wounded, and it's a fairly small clearing. You maybe could get two Heelys in it, but we were single ship. We went in, and as soon as I went in, I turned around and faced out the way I was going. They started to bring the wounded soldiers over to the ship, and a North Vietnamese that is in a tree empties an entire AK-47 clip into the side of the helicopter. And of the clip, 9 rounds hit the aircraft. One of the rounds hit the engine on the bleed band, so the engine's not working right. Another round hit the oil tank, so the oil tank actually exploded. And the other rounds went between me and the co-pilot and totally destroyed the dashboard where all the instruments were. And the guy I'm flying with, who's not in command of the aircraft, wants to land. I'm determined we're going to leave. And we had a little disagreement about it for a few seconds, but we did leave. And I did fly at 5.5 kilometers to an Army fire base and did a hard landing on it. Not much left of the helicopter after that. But the good luck of being that close to having your head blown off to being able to fly to safety was just amazing.
Well, after staying there 9 months, I was supposed to go on R&R. So I went on R&R to Hong Kong, Kowloon, the new island in Hong Kong, and I enjoyed myself. And my second R&R was I came to the States for 7 and 7. Yes, I enjoyed myself, but I hated to go back to Vietnam. But from when I was leaving the States, but after I got flying into the country, I knew I was going to see my buddies again, so I fell in love with the idea of going back to Vietnam.
Bob Hope, of course, was all over Southeast Asia.
And Bob Hope was somewhere around Saigon. He wasn't in Saigon.
I had the good fortune of being able to see Bob Hope.
We had to leave at 6:30 in the morning to get there by 8 for the show with Bob Hope and Ann Margaret at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Hey, here we are at Lark K. And I gotta be honest with you, I know Lucky. Now, it's a real thrill to be here at Lark K, home of the Big Red One. This is quite a spot. I stepped off the plane, I was mugged by a mosquito.
Favorite song in the 60s was I Don't Get Any Satisfaction. I Don't Get Any Satisfaction. We played that frequently in the aircraft because we had speakers, we mounted speakers, and we played I Don't Get No Satisfaction.
I still recall the song, I think, that everyone over there had committed to memory, Leaving on a Jet Plane, to make that trip back home.
I think during the 60s, there were so many good songs and good groups. I think I really like the Hollies and the version they did called He's Not Heavy, He's My Brother.
The one song that I think every soldier, airman, and Navy guy who served in Vietnam had as their song was that one by the Animals, I believe it was, We Got to Get Out of This Place.
The favorite song was Catch a Quick Plane to Get Out of Here.
One of the most moving films and themes that got me through Vietnam was the theme from Mondokani and the song More. And it was more than the greatest love the world has known. This is the love I give to you alone.
James Brown, say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud.
The memories were obviously difficult in the sense of what was going on in the news and the radio and the protests that were happening in the streets against the war, and then what really distressed me as a young child and an elementary student, because my dad was a soldier and people were protesting about soldiers, and it just, in my opinion, was wrong. You can protest the war and disagree with the war, but the soldiers are doing what the nation asked them to do.
Well, during the time I came back in '67, but we was already told that what was going to happen to us when we arrived in the States. There were violence and people against us going to do what we were sent to do for the country. And each time there was something to come back to what was happening, what shouldn't have been happening. '67 was Detroit riots. I was in the 82nd, assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division. I went up to Detroit when I came back home in January '67. And when I went over for Tet of '68, I came back to D.C. riots, which were the riots they started after they killed Martin Luther King. And '72, when I came home, the country was trying to come out of Vietnam, so it wasn't a pleasant thing. There was a lot of money, and there was homeless vets, and there was families without their dads, brothers, and sisters.
But the times that were good were the times when we survived getting shot at. The times that were good were when we had to say goodbye to friends whose tours were over.
My finest memory, as well as everybody else's, was probably the day that you boarded the airplane going home. That was special.
Yes, I still think about Vietnam every day. You can't forget it if you live that life. And you think about your friends you lost in Vietnam.
In a professional sense, I've always looked back at that experience as it will never get any tougher than this. If you can handle what you handled in Southeast Asia, you can handle anything. In my case, that the Air Force threw at me.
I have no regrets for having served in Vietnam. Vietnam gave me my life's work. I made many friends. I learned the skills that I needed to become a professional logistician, and it gave me an opportunity to share my experiences with other people.
I think my life has been affected by Vietnam in some important ways. It certainly contributed to my military career in terms of background and experience, and it certainly was part of what forged a tight link between me and the United States Army. So in that sense, it was a catalyst to to progress and to stay in the military longer.
Do I think about my Vietnam experience? I guess the truthful answer would be yes, I sure do. The things that I learned in Vietnam that have never gone away is don't take anything for granted. And the other thing that I will never forget is the ingenuity of the individual soldier is unbelievable. They will do, regardless of rank, regardless of service, regardless of anything, they will do just beyond belief, unhuman type of things without any direction. They just do it.
I've never been back to Vietnam. I have mixed emotions about going back. I think I would enjoy the people, I would enjoy the sights, but there are a lot of memories there that would question whether I really wanted to go back into the area, particularly where I worked.
I have spent a lot of time looking at Google overhead imagery of the base I was located at. It's almost totally overgrown. But I would like to return at some point in the future to visit a few of the bases, to include going to some of the locations in Vietnam that I visited.
I would love to go back. Several of my friends have gone back. The experience is great and wonderful. The country is booming. Oh my God.
I have a high regard for the Vietnamese people that had the courage and that have come to America. And they wouldn't have that opportunity if we hadn't done what we did.
The war is over, as it should be. And it should be over in the minds. My generation, it should only be a memory, good, bad, or otherwise. But the young people coming forward, it should be a homeland that they love and respect and cherish.
I've been to the wall twice, and each time it's difficult, really difficult. And here just recently, within the last year and a half, I went to my basic school 367 reunion, and we rang the bell for all those men that never came home. And it was, I think about it a lot, and with reverence.
Well, I certainly consider the Vietnam vets to be deserving of as much honor and praise as any conflict before us. I think the willingness to serve and the willingness to endure dangers and hardships are universal with all conflicts. And whether or not one agrees or disagrees with a political background or foundation for a conflict doesn't really affect the individual soldier.
My personal lessons learned was probably one of them that you are always amazed at what you can do if you put yourself in a position where you force yourself to do something. There were some very difficult times, and I was amazed at the human spirit of others that could go ahead and accomplish things that you didn't think they could.
We aren't heroes just because we go. We're heroes more because we help each other, because we do fight for what we believe in, and because of the fact that our republic has largely remained unchanged to this time.
These quiet heroes who we slogged through jungles with, fought side by side with, were wounded with, and sometimes helplessly watched die, always considered themselves just ordinary people. But they were far from ordinary. They viewed themselves as just, well, ordinary because they were humble, patriotic, and selfless.
Thanks for your service. Thanks for what you've done. We appreciate you. Your sacrifices were not in vain. You did what the nation asked you to do.
As we salute our own, I would like to send a special thanks to our Vietnam vets for all they have done and continue to do for our nation and the G4.
My generation thanks you. Thank you for your service.
I am proud to help salute our own.
As a veteran, I understand your service. Your service paved the way for me to serve. Thank you for your sacrifice.
I know you still carry the scars from Vietnam, and I am forever grateful for your service.
As a fellow veteran and service member, thank you very much for your service and sacrifice. If you haven't heard it, welcome home.
As a wife to a Vietnam veteran, thank you for your support and sacrifice.
I had family members and friends that served in the Vietnam War. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to both family and the veterans of the Vietnam War. Your sacrifices were not in vain. Welcome home.
How I would describe a Vietnam veteran. A warrior patriot. They fought in a faraway place, in difficult times, with lots of political decisions that were made. It probably was very frustrating to them, and yet they did it. And welcome home. Welcome home, finally.